Hello, beautiful humans, and welcome to another episode at the Bitcoin Stoa. As a reminder, the Stoa is a community-funded project, so if you enjoy listening, you can support our work by sending some sats to the QR code on our website at bitcoinstoa.com, or you can stream sats using something like a Bitcoin wallet that has a podcast feature. I use the Breeze app right now, and if you go to newpodcastapps.com, you'll see a list of awesome podcast apps that integrate Bitcoin at the moment. And the user experience is quite good. So current Moscow time is 26:09 at 7:19,778. And with that said, it's my honor to welcome Gigi to the Stoa for our conversation about value for value payments. Gigi, welcome to the Stoa.
Hey, thanks for having me. And I'm amazed already, like you're doing everything right. Newpodcastingapps.com, Moscow time with the right format. I love it already.
There you go. We're off to a good start. And speaking of time, we had this, and I work for a global health network, so I battle with time zones regularly, and just the nuance of like winter, summertime, time changes. Like maybe I should start scheduling shit based on blocks. Like literally, that might be the solution to a global time standard, as you very well know.
Yeah, it doesn't work as well for future events, unfortunately, because it's a bit tricky like that.
Right, it's a little bit unpredictable. It's unpredictable, but also predictable. It's like this weird conundrum.
Exactly.
So Gigi, I found your writing to be really powerful personally and also in recommending it to others. And what I like most about it is that it's accessible for people of varying degrees of Bitcoin understanding. Dear family, dear friends, I read that like several times, one after the other. And then I literally astroturfed it to every human I knew that I had crossed paths with that expressed interest in Bitcoin, because I found it just very profound and very to the point, very readable. And your recent piece about value for value is sort of what maybe you want to reach out to you and have this conversation. But maybe before we get into that article, I'd love to hear how you came across Bitcoin, how Bitcoin, intersected on your life path, when that was, and maybe some of the more significant moments along the way. And feel free to tell it in whatever length, whatever brevity or long format you want, just to give people some context before we dive into the article.
All right. Yeah, I'll try to be brief because it is a long story. And so I discovered Bitcoin relatively early, but I also dismissed it immediately. Like I think I first heard about it in like 2013, something like that. And I have a tech background, so I studied computer science, and I was working in a computer science lab in a research institute that tried to do various more or less interesting things, but we tried to build something like the Google Knowledge Graph, but not in a practical commercial way, but in a more theoretical scientific way. Let's put it like that. And a colleague of mine, he was kind of fiddling around with Bitcoin already back then, and I always made fun of him. Like it will get hacked, and it's funny in the internet money. Why are you wasting your time and so on? And so it took me multiple touch points. So yeah, I heard about it again periodically, and there were a couple of run-ups. So like you usually hear about Bitcoin when it's at the all-time highs again, when it
Right.
busts
Yes.
through everyone's consciousness again. And so this happened to me a couple of times, and for me it took really a long time to understand first of all how it works, but especially what it is, and what it wants to be, or what it like why we need Bitcoin in the first place. The why behind it eluded me for many years. And so that's also why I'm so involved in writing about it and educating others about Bitcoin, because I understand that it's like I know how it is to not understand it for the longest time.
Right.
And I made all the mistakes, and that's also why I wrote the Dear Family, Dear Friends article that a lot of people liked, which literally was supposed to be a letter for people that every Bitcoiner knows this. There are people that just reach out to you again, and either they laugh at you because Bitcoin just crashed by 30% or what have you, or like you don't hear from them for like 2 years, and then Bitcoin moons and they reach out again. It's like I wrote it to have one thing that I can just send to everyone, and basically, okay, if you really read this and internalize it and take it to heart, then I'm willing to talk to you again. But so I just wanted to make my life a little bit easier, and I tried to distill all the lessons I learned kind of what's the best way to get into Bitcoin? I would say, or the easiest and least risky way to get into it, because I made all the mistakes. Like my journey into Bitcoin was a very, very long and painful one. Like I dismissed it for multiple years. I did not buy for many, many years, and I did not understand it for many, many years. I did not understand money at all. Like I only viewed it through the lens of technology, and that it's a cool new tech thingy that will be replaced by something that's better. And so I did not grasp the profundity of it, and I had no economic or monetary understanding. And so the last couple of years I just tried to catch up to everyone else that already understood this stuff. All the Austrians and people like Michael Goldstein and Pierre Rochard and Seyfedin as well. Everyone who was super, super early in thinking about Bitcoinization and hyper Bitcoinization and kind of the change that Bitcoin will bring to the world. And so the last couple of years, I think I switched to Bitcoin full time in 2017, if that's right. And ever since, I just dedicate every waking hour basically to Bitcoin, and I try to educate, and I'm still coding a bit. And I did a bunch of various projects and things in the space, and I also wrote a book. That's why most people know me. So most people know me in Bitcoin as the author of 21 Lessons.
Yes, and you're writing another book, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm trying to, at least. Turns out to be harder than I thought. I thought, I already wrote one, so it's going to be very easy to just pump out another one. But it turns out more difficult than I expected, mostly because I just got involved into too many other projects.
Right.
So shame on me.
That's okay. You know what? Good things take time. And I think, the most important things in my life have always given me the most friction and the most resistance. And it's almost like, it's like the hardest mountains to climb are the most rewarding ones when you get to the peak. And I think, I am a very big fan of 21 Lessons. I use it as like a little quick read if I want a little nugget of Bitcoin knowledge. It's almost like Bitcoin opens up this door that everyone has the option to walk through. The cost of entry is your attention. There's no monetary cost. But attention is the most valuable resource. And that door opens to a PhD in understanding the world, the mechanics of how the world works. A subsection of that is how money works, which in and of itself is a lifetime study. So it is really, Bitcoin is what you make of it. And everyone comes to Bitcoin from different perspectives, which kind of colors your initial view of it, right? It's like the 10 blind men touching the elephant. Everything can feel different. And only once you really invest a lot of attention do you start to see the elephant in its true whole form. And then it's, at that point, sometimes it's even more overwhelming, but at least you get an idea of what this thing can be from the different perspectives. So thanks for sharing that. And, I know you've impacted, I think, way more people than you think. Even just the people that I've sent your articles to, they resonate a lot with them and have changed. I have distinctly noticed that some people's perspectives have changed after reading some of your stuff. So thank you for contributing to the space so much, probably much more than you think in terms of its effect. And speaking of things you write, during block 716.448, you posted an article titled "The Freedom of Value: How Value for Value Fixes the Monetization of Information." And, it really caught my eye because, number one, I'm seeing this value for value technology, what Bitcoin as a technology through Lightning is enabling for value in terms of like being able to stream sats to podcasts that I listen to, which is like still magical when I see it happen. But the health network I'm part of is actively trying to solve this problem as well, right? To find a better way to monetize our content and our digital products in a way that aligns interests with the people consuming the content and the people who are creating it. So, I really think maybe a good place to start is like, why did you write the piece? And then let's go from there.
So first of all, thanks for all the kind words. It's very overwhelming sometimes because I don't think of myself as as having such a big impact. I'm just a guy basically sitting in the basement and typing something sometimes, and it's really overwhelming because for example, also the Dear Family, Dear Friends letter, it was translated into like 20 languages or something, and people reach out to me daily, in terms of that like they finally understand money now, and they understand Bitcoin, and it changed their life in various ways and so on. And it's really like it's almost impossible to deal with this, like I mean, I have mental breakdowns every second day because someone writes me something outrageous, like how Bitcoin saved their family and stuff like that. And I mean, I'm in a similar position, like Bitcoin saved me in a way, and my family too, like it is this very it's this protective technology of sorts, and also it enables all kinds of freedoms that it's really mind-blowing how powerful of a technology it is, or how powerful of a thing it is. And I think it's very right what you said, the allegory with the blind man touching the blind monks touching the elephant, that I think no one really knows what Bitcoin is yet. And
Right.
That's why I'm also hesitant in calling it a technology, because it's more than that, like it really transforms your perspective. And as you also said, it forces you to think about value very deeply, because it forces you to think about money very deeply. And this brings us to the value for value article, the freedom of value, because I've been thinking about this problem for a very long time, even before Bitcoin, that there is just no sensible way of, how should I put this? Digital information in itself behaves very, very differently than a physical good. And selling a physical good is a very straightforward transaction. Like I have an apple, I want to sell it. I want to sell this apple to you. So I give the apple to you and you give me money, and that's it, And for digital goods, that's so different. And if I have a picture of an apple and I want to sell it to you, we immediately run into the double spend problem. Like I can sell at no cost to me, I can sell a copy of the picture of the apple. Like digital information, the nature of information is such that it has to be copied. It's not only that it can be copied, but if you want to move information cannot be moved, period. Like if I want to send you a file, I have to copy it. There is no other way. And the way that computers move information, quote unquote, is they copy it and they delete the original. And even the language I use is very imprecise, because with digital information there is no original. The concept of an original does not exist, because every single, like it's a perfect replica, and when you have, like take an abstract concept like the letter A or the number 3 or a circle. What is the original 3? Can you answer this question? No, it's nonsensical. Like and that's the nature of information. Like if you if you have a digital string of bits and bytes, it's impossible to tell apart a copy from the quote unquote original, what we think of as an original. So I'm just ranting about this to make it very obvious that
it's good. Keep going.
That the digital realm is, like, digital information is very, very different than the physical goods that we are so used to, and so selling it, monetizing it, is insanely difficult. And that's what I was also writing about in the piece, that paywalls just don't work for this reason alone. I mean, there are more reasons why paywalls don't work, but you just cannot build a cage around information. That's also why DRM never worked, and will never work. If you like any and if you're old enough, you remember, like computer games and all kinds of things, and also programs had all kind of weird ways to protect themselves from being copied. Like you had to enter special words of the manual in like page 47, the 13th word, then you can play your Indiana Jones computer game or what have you. And it's all stupid. It doesn't work because of this, because of the nature of information. And the most succinct way to drive this point home is like this. I don't even remember now who said it, but it's a very wise saying. It's like if I have an apple and you have an apple, and we trade, we exchange those apples, then we still have one apple. But if I have an idea and you have an idea and we exchange those ideas, then each of us has two ideas, And digital information in general, but especially digital information, the way it works is it works like ideas. So if you trade it has this multiplication effect. And so it's it's not scarce. Digital information is never scarce because information is not scarce. It's just about, like you said, you're just paying with your attention. That's all that's possible, because information can be replicated at zero marginal cost always. And also, there is no way to have copy protection for information, because if you can read the information in some way, shape, or form, it doesn't matter if it's encrypted or what have you, you can perfectly replicate it always. That's why all anti-piracy things always fail. You can always just rip it off Netflix or what have you. Like it it never works. Even if you control everything, all the distribution channels from A to C, it doesn't matter. You can still always find ways to access the information, because in the end you need to make the information eligible again for the end user. And as soon as this is done, you can copy it as well. It's just like pointing a camera on your TV screen. Like that's a very stupid way to a very lossy way to do this, but that's the right way to think about it. Like even if all the data streams, everything is encrypted, there will be a point where the user wants to see this information, has access to it, and then that's the point where you can grab it and copy it again. And so we have to think about this differently, and I was delighted that people like Adam Curry have been thinking about this problem for like 10 years plus, and now it materialized thanks to Bitcoin, because now we have a way to, in a very fine-grained manner, send real value back. And basically the idea of the value for value model, as you know, is that the information is free. You can listen to it for free. You can watch whatever it is for free. You can read the article for free. But if you found it valuable, you voluntarily give back. So it is a very, very different monetization model than any kind of paywall or selling a physical good. And I think it is the right model to monetize information, because everything else fails. And we even see this historically. DRM failed like 20 times over.
Let's talk about DRM being digital rights management, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's basically trying to find a way to make information non-copyable, which is an oxymoron. Like the nature of information is to be copied. And so scarce information, that's like, I'm getting always worked up about it, because also in the quote unquote crypto space, they talk about scarce digital assets and so on. And that's not how it works. People, right. There is no such thing as a scarce digital asset. Like it's, and I'm saying this as a Bitcoiner, but what Bitcoin does is it constructs this game of sorts that you can participate in voluntarily, and once you enter in this game, you have certain rules that define the scarcity. It's very much like chess, like if you decide to play chess, the pieces and or maybe a better, the pieces are kind of scarce as well, but that's not the perfect metaphor. But the chessboard itself is limited. It's scarce. Everyone agrees, it has this many rows and this many columns. I'm not a chess player. I don't even know by heart how large a chessboard is.
That's okay, but the metaphor still holds. Yeah, it's fixed and there's rules, because if there was no rules,
everyone knows, and you cannot increase it arbitrarily, because then it wouldn't be chess anymore. You can't simply add a row and make the game still make sense, or make it twice as big. It's like, chess is boring, let's increase the size by 2x. And that's so stupid. It's such a stupid way to think about it. But I think it's the perfect metaphor, because it's like the size of the board is not scarce because we can't make more of it. And it's the same is true for Bitcoin. Like as we've seen, we can fork Bitcoin and do all kinds of things. And you can copy every aspect of Bitcoin. Like I keep harping about this. Because there is no such thing as information that cannot be copied. Everything in Bitcoin can be copied, because everything in Bitcoin is information. The thing that cannot be copied is the network and the value stored in it. And also it works because participants have secret information. And this is all part of this game, and you have your private key, and you have the obligation to keep it secure and keep it secret and so on. And so it's all about using the properties of information in a way to kind of simulate digital scarcity. Let's put it like that. But there is no such thing as information that cannot be copied, and there never will be. Like it's a complete oxymoron. And so, since we are talking about selling digital information, we have to think about this differently. And I think the value for value model is the correct way to think about it. It's like information wants to be free. It will always be quote unquote pirated, even though I don't agree with this term, but I, I don't have a better one currently. But it will always be copied and made available to others, especially if the information is valuable. You know, like if a movie is really good, you will have no problem watching it quote unquote illegally, you know, even though I don't think this should be illegal or anything like that. But you will find it in 20 different streaming sites, and you can torrent it, and you'll find it on YouTube and on Vimeo and whatnot, you know. And so I wrote about this in the piece as well. You know, it's a kind of paradox. The only information that stays behind paywalls is information that is really, really shitty. That's really bad. The movie that no one wants to see, the article that no one wants to read. That's the stuff that will stay behind the paywalls. But if an article is really good, and we see this all the time, you know, like now the New York Times and the Financial Times and whatnot, they all switch to paywall and subscription models and so on. And I see these articles, like if one article, I mean, it happens less frequently now, but if an article is really good, then someone will just screenshot it and post it on Facebook or on Twitter or what have you, you know, or send it around on WhatsApp or Telegram or whatever messenger is currently used. And so that's just the nature of information again, you know, like you can read it, so you can also share it freely. That's just the way it is.
And you can transcribe it. Like you can literally transcribe the entire article and post it somewhere with perfect fidelity. And it's like, it's this weird nonsensical game, right? It's a futile game that people try and play in order. It's almost like, okay, information wants to be free and it's freely copyable. That's the nature of information. And you have this great quote in the piece by Bruce Schneier that says, trying to make digital files uncopyable is like trying to make water not wet. And it's like, good luck. You're probably just going to crush yourself trying to achieve something that's unachievable. And this whole notion that if information wants to be free and it's easily copied, then we need to align how we're viewing this in terms of how we're charging for information. And, you know, you talk about this value for value model where, you know, people are used to paying for something and then being able to enjoy that thing that they paid for, right? You pay to get into the movie, you then proceed to watch the movie. And value for value sort of inverts that, right? Where you enjoy something and then you pay for it voluntarily based on the value received. And this isn't really a new model, right? On the picture of your article, there's a busker, and we're all familiar with this, right? Buskers go out there, they give their music away or whatever they're performing away for free. And if you get value from it, or you want that person to keep playing, you pay them. You essentially communicate the value they've given you after having enjoyed the thing that they're giving. And I think that's it's such a human way of communicating value with one another. And it's there's such better alignment there, right? Where people don't feel ripped off because they're paying based on what the value they received. And the value they receive is going to be very subjective and different for everyone, right? So if you create a product, someone consumes that product, they get X amount of value from it, they will compensate you based on the value they received. Someone else might get significantly more value. And so you're no longer pricing people out and saying, this is what it's worth. If you don't think it's worth that, you can't have it. You're basically saying, this is free. If you get value, you can compensate me for the value I've given you. And that is such a humane, honest way of going about paying people for things. And it's the only way with information, like you said. Yeah. So it's like, yeah,
absolutely. And it's not only about pricing people out. It's also, you know, the ingenious thing about value for value, I think, and that's something that I didn't realize before I heard Adam Curry talk about it. So all credit to him. But there is also no price ceiling. You know, like if someone to use the busking example, you know, if there's a street performer or a musician or what have you that really just made your night, changed your life, what have you, you know, it might be worth a lot to you, especially if you're a millionaire, you know, like you might have a lot of cash on you and just you throw a ridiculous amount of cash into the hat. And I mean, in the real world, it doesn't work that well because everyone will see that, you know, and, you know, we'll jump to the head that there will be a huge
fight.
Put
a QR code there instead of a
exactly. But that's also why it's a little bit an imperfect analogy, because online it will be different. But I really see value for value as a way to revivify the idea of busking, because it is, as you said, you know, it's a very old idea. I mean, this has worked for thousands of years. They're street performers, and there's a hat on the ground. And if you, as you said, if you want the music to continue, you just drop a couple of coins into the hat. And what's so interesting in cyberspace is that the space is unlimited, and the time as well. Like if you're a street performer, you are in one city, in one place, and you play certain hours of the day. And for articles or also for podcasts, you put them online, and they can live for a very, very long time. And your audience is potentially global, like if depending on your language and so on and so forth, of course, but still, like there is no upper limit. And I think that's really, really interesting, because we see, and I think I did not really put this into the piece, but I think I spoke about it before. We see that there are you have this extreme Pareto distribution of what people are willing to give and what people are willing to pay. And we see this, for example, in casinos, and we also see this in free-to-play games, where a lot of computer games switch their business model from just selling the title to selling in-game items. And for competitive games especially, the in-game items are just cosmetics. They're completely useless. You won't be a better player because you purchase items. I mean, because no one likes pay to win, like that's especially for competitive games, that's ridiculous. And so, for example, in Counter-Strike and other games, you can purchase skins, and they don't give you any benefit. It's just like a show-off, and it's just like, I mean, there are some gambling mechanics in there and so on. I'm not trying to hype it up as like a perfect system, but my point is that there's like 1% of players, they will spend ridiculous amounts of money on it, and they are kind of carrying everyone else. Like if you want to play it for free, that's fine. It's about just making enough money. It's not about making money off of everyone. It's just about making enough money so you can continue your business or your operation or what have you. And I think that's really like just flipping this model on its head, that you can have access to the information for free, and you trust into your audience to give back enough value so that you can continue. If the gaming world is any indication, most titles that switch to the free-to-play model, they increased their revenue by like multiple times, and that's really interesting. That's really something to think about. And I think we're still far off from that, because I think it's mostly a psychological shift, and it's also like an adoption and tactical shift. Not everyone has a Bitcoin wallet yet, let alone an app that can stream Lightning payments and so on. But I think it's mostly a psychological shift, that you have to make the conscious decision to, hey, that was so good, that was so valuable, I'm willing to throw a couple of coins into the hat, and I'm willing to give back. Because the alternative, and that's what you said as well, like it aligns incentives in such a nice way. It's such a human way to have an interaction and to give back directly, because the alternative is the hell we're currently living in, just focusing on the online hell. Right. Which is just the incentives are completely misaligned. It's all about clickbait, and it's all about stealing your attention, and it's all about how many advertisement seconds can I get into the video, how many ad reads can I get in. And you have this these midway ad rolls in podcasts, for example, that always destroy the joy of it all. And everything, like the content itself, it becomes this shallow clickbaity content, because we're measuring the wrong thing. Like you're measuring clicks, and you're measuring view time, and you're measuring quote unquote engagement, but the way we are measuring engagement is you're measuring outrage. Like if you look at the engagement metrics in social media feeds, the thing that gets the most retweets, the most likes, the most comments and so on, it has the most quote unquote engagement, but it's just the most divisive, outrageous stuff that gets shared. And people also know that, that's why this stuff gets gamed all the time. And it also gets gamed in insanely stupid ways, just to make the point. Like you post 3 images and you dress it up as a poll, and it's like, comment for option A and retweet for option B and like for option C. And it's that's like the the evolutionary environment of the online world we're currently living in, and it all optimizes for these completely broken and stupid metrics, and also in the podcasting world, everyone knows that there isn't an easy way, because it's like a decentralized system. There isn't an easy way to measure how many people listen to it, and so people use the next best metric, which is downloads, which is also completely meaningless, because most podcatcher apps, most podcast apps, they download all the episodes so that you can listen to them offline, and so all the metrics are broken, all the monetization is broken, all the incentives are broken, and that's why we see this insane world of fake news and clickbait and outrage porn in all the feeds, and all these addictive mechanics, like all the apps, all the social media apps, including YouTube, they implement the darkest patterns that we know. Yeah. How can you maximize view time? How can you get people addicted? Not only people, but how can you get children as young as like 8 months old addicted to a feed of cartoons that is endless, and you splice some advertisements in between, and then you have some numbers that you can show the advertisement agency, like 15 million kids or what have you watched this many hours of advertisements this month, and it's all ridiculous and it's all broken. And I'm really angry about it, actually, because the internet is something that's very dear to me, and it was such a promising thing, and this for multiple reasons it wasn't easy to do this monetization correctly, and so now we did it incorrectly, and now everything is kind of out of whack, in my estimation.
Yeah, I mean, so the health network that I'm part of, I was the person who was stewarding the Instagram, which in and of itself was like a strong internal conflict. It's like, we're trying to spread health information to empower people to take back responsibility for their health using a broadcast platform that is inherently unhealthy for people. It's like a super twisted thing. But it was the best option we had. And I remember, every quarter I'll take a week off from Instagram, and I'll post like we're taking a week off, and we hope this leads by example so that you can do this too, and really acknowledge like, what is Instagram, what is the effect that social media is having on you, and to just like remove ourselves with a hard constraint, say a week off of it, to really learn like, how much is this affecting me. And I remember one of the first ones I did, I decided to do a deep dive into understanding the game theory of social media, and I went through all Tristan Harris's work, and I was immensely disturbed at this whole notion that I never knew the background incentive structure, and that time on site is the strict optimization because that is what optimizes for profits. And, Tristan says it perfectly. He says, well, that becomes a race to the bottom of the brainstem. Whoever can hijack your attention most effectively is rewarded most heavily when we commodify attention. And so
that's why TikTok is winning. That's why TikTok is winning,
And so we externalize unwinding of our cultural fabric and destroying the human attention realm for the sake of profits. And it's like, once you're there, you're kind of stuck there, right? Yeah. Good luck selling to the Facebook or TikTok board to say, we're going to take 75% profit cut, but we're going to not fuck people's brains up as much. It's like, we'll take up profits, right? It's like this machine that can't be stopped. And so this whole notion of value for value, rescuing the internet and putting a more humane way of essentially, and part of the problem is, if everything's free, why should people want to pay? Like, if someone puts that question to you, I really don't think people actually understand that they are the product. And until they realize that, they're not going to want to pay.
It's actually surprising. I'm actually surprised how wrong this is. And I run into this all the time, especially business-minded people. They are of the opinion, if it is available for free, no one will pay, period. And that's simply wrong. It is simply wrong. It is demonstrably wrong. And I think people will be surprised how willing people are to pay for it. And I think also, Wikipedia is a good example, actually, because it is completely user funded, and of course, Wikipedia is very obnoxious about it. You have this big Jimmy Wales banner hitting you in the face like once a year, or I don't know, once a quarter. I don't know how frequent it is, but it's, if you explain it to people are actually willing to pay for it. It's like, okay, if we don't raise this money, basically, then we have to stop the operation, and that's it. And so people are like, okay, of course, I got so much value out of Wikipedia I have no problem donating like $50 to it, like no problem at all. Like Wikipedia basically is in large parts responsible for my university level education. Like I did not learn out of textbooks. Like everyone else, I used Wikipedia. I think in in certain fields that's the norm. And so I think it's just a wrong argument that people are not going to pay for it. And I think Adam Curry says this all the time as well. The number one reason why people don't give back is that they don't know, and that they don't know that they can, and that people don't ask, like content producers don't ask in the if we pick podcasting 2.0, for example, podcasters as an example. And it's so interesting that that coming back to the platform problem and to TikTok, the reason why I said that's why TikTok is winning, because it found a way to really hack your brainstem. It's like it's AI driven, very customized porn for your brain. And
yeah, it's like crack cocaine for your brain.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
Insane.
And it doesn't matter what you're into. If you're into dancing, it will be dancing porn. If you're into cooking, it will be cooking porn. It will be the shortest videos that just get you off, and then it's the next one and the next one and the next one, and it never repeats, and it's always amazing, and so on. And so it's really something. It's really something. Like it's such a cursed app. It's really something. Like the fact that this exists really tells you something about the world. And the reason why value for value is so ingenious and really breaks this loop kind of is that every platform is incentivized to maximize profits. But you as a content creator are not. It's just like when you're opening a bakery, you're not taking on McDonald's, like if it's just this one bakery and you're baking bread with your family until the rest of your days, you don't want to, you know what I mean? Like you're not after global expansion immediately. You're not about, making more money.
You want to give value to the people you work for.
Yeah, exactly. And that's good enough. And that's fine. And it's something, if you can do something that you love, and it's enough to have, a meaningful life and not starve to death and just pay the bills and pay rent, basically, then that's good enough. I think that's good enough for most people. Like I think the number of megalomaniacs that want to take over the world is rather small, and those megalomaniacs end up, of course, running those large platforms, because you have to be, otherwise you die. It's growth at all costs. And that's such a it's such a broken way of thinking about the world, and such a broken way of optimizing things. That's why I really that's one thing that I enjoy so much about the Bitcoin space. It's the return to more traditional values, and just having enough, kind of, and just you have your farm, and you have your couple of things, and you're happy, and you have your family, and you do things that you love, and you're not getting Jeff Bezos level rich. And it's fine. It's what else do you want? And especially if you're a content creator and you really enjoy podcasting or writing or what have you, and you also really enjoy just giving this to the world. You don't want to sell it in the first place. You want to make it available for free. That's why millions of blogs exist. Like they also podcasters, I think like 80% of podcasters are not doing it for monetary gain. But just imagine if you can turn this into something that will give you some monetary gain back, just because it's possible, and just because people really like what you produce. I think it has the potential to change the world in an insanely drastic way, because it removes one interesting anecdote. Maybe I purposefully do not track clicks on any of my sites, on any article. And I don't want to do it, because it will lead you on the path to hell. It will lead you in the direction of TikTok. If you start tracking clicks, and if you like Medium, I really hate Medium, for example, because it tracks all this stuff for you, and if it's there, then people want to look, and then, oh man, why didn't the last article perform as well, and so on. And then you're immediately into this game of trying to optimize for clicks and trying to optimize for what have you. And I think the value for value model removes that completely. I mean, of course, like you can track how many sets you're getting and so on, but I personally, I don't do that. I just I put this stuff out, and a little bit comes back, and it's absolutely wonderful. Like I think I think we're close to something where this can become the norm, where there is, and we don't need a lot of people, like it can even be a there can be the advertisement world, and there can be the value for value community. And if enough people think about this in this different way, then I think I truly think we will have more engaging content, meaningful content, and we will go down a different path, and not the path of shallowness and addiction and TikTok and all the rest of it, but of real human connection, real interaction, and real, deep long form content as well, and those kind of things that a lot of people value.
Yeah, and it's just such it's a human way of it's a truly peer-to-peer way of compensating creators. And like you said, it gives you, the value you get sent back to you for the work you've done in a non-specific way. You don't necessarily need to know which article that person came from and how much they paid you for that specific article, but it's basically just a global metric, feedback metric for creators to say, people are sending value to me, therefore it sort of serves as a form of recognition that you're on the right path. You are doing something that's giving value to the world. The world is giving you a nudge, a feedback loop to say, we value what you're doing, keep doing it. And here's some financial compensation so that you can keep doing it. And I think this whole notion of taking power away from the platforms and essentially rebuilding human to human relationships, even if they're on a global spectrum. And I think even just technologically, value for value, if we had this conversation 5 years ago, it would have been a very different conversation, because technologically we had to make certain improvements in order to enable a frictionless, high quality experience. Because if there's a shitload of friction, right? If you can't pay 99 cents to someone, or even if you can with your Visa, but you have to fill out this massive Visa form, not only does the creator not get 99 cents out of 99 cents, but you have to do all these things in order to just pay someone a small amount. And so from a microtransactions perspective, like, this wasn't even really possible before. Right now,
yeah.
Bitcoin, like with Lightning, Bitcoin solves a big part of the technical or the technological aspect of being able to do microtransactions, essentially bringing the marginal cost of a transaction to zero regardless of the amount. And that is like, that in and of itself is a huge advancement. What are your thoughts on that? And like, how big has that technological advancement been in your thinking of value for value and the feasibility of actually doing this at scale?
Yeah. I mean, there is a reason why we are into, like, why we are in this mess. Direct monetization just did not work. And to use your example, 99 cents with a credit card, like, that's not feasible. It's not economically feasible. Like, you have a certain amount of fraud and chargebacks and whatnot, and just the system is so burdensome that the fees will eat everything up. And so we needed something like Lightning for this to work, because it is mostly about micropayments, especially if you automate it away, like, just like it works in podcasting 2.0, where your app, based on your settings that you voluntarily define, but the app will pay the creator by the minute. And that's what we call streaming sats, because just you're streaming satoshis basically every minute, or depending on the implementation, also every second to the creator. And you're right, it just wasn't possible before. So it's absolutely amazing. And I think this is just the tip of the iceberg of what we are like podcasting 2.0 with the streaming sets. I think it really is just the beginning of what we will see in the future, because so much interesting new things are possible now. It kind of boggles the mind. And it's very interesting that kind of the just the friction that we had in the old system, with credit cards and all of that, was enough to completely ruin the internet,
Right.
And,
yeah, I know.
we have this, everyone knows the 404 error, the HTTP error, when a site does not exist, and then you will get back 404. And there's also, most people don't know, there's the 402 error, which says payment required. So we wanted to do this since the beginning of the internet, to include payments into the internet and have some value infrastructure on the internet. But it just was never possible, and it was never feasible to do. And one super important aspect of this all is, if you use Visa or MasterCard or PayPal or what have you, you always have a man in the middle. You always have a trusted third party that takes care of the payment. And as we've seen historically, that's like that this is a bad thing is an understatement, because if your podcast revolves around political commentary, for example, or if your newsletter or the articles you write or even the books that you write are political, and you are it doesn't matter if you're in an authoritarian regime or it's just, you're pissing off Visa or MasterCard because, let's say, your articles are pornographic or what have you, you will be completely deplatformed, and you will be deplatformed from not only from the content side, but from the payment side. Your accounts will be frozen. You will not be able to receive money. You will not be able to receive payments. And this is, if people want to look into this, like this is how the US, this was one of the most important tools in US politics to freeze accounts and to use payment providers like Visa and MasterCard to just straight up destroy the livelihood of people, just to straight up, just, okay, we don't like what this person is saying or doing, just make them miss all the rent payments and make them starve to death, basically. Because to be honest, if you don't have access to modern banking and payment infrastructure, it's very, very hard to do things. Like you can really cancel someone, you can really deplatform someone from life, if you have the power to do this. And of course, value for value uses Bitcoin, so this is not possible. These are direct payments. It's like cash payments. It's like throwing a coin into the hat. It's like it's very hard to overstate how different this is and how revolutionary this is, even though it feels very much like a Venmo or a PayPal or what have you payment. The most people do not realize the difference, but it is such a big difference. And that's also why I'm super, super bullish on value for value, because I think we definitely need something that that makes sure that free speech can still exist online. Like the current environment with all the censorship, deplatforming, filtering, and all the rest of it. If you just look at Twitter and Facebook and I mean pick any example. The pandemic with COVID-19 is a great example. There was so many things labeled of those platforms. They positioned them as connecting people and offering a platform for exchanging ideas and information and free speech and so on. And when push comes to shove, if there is someone who can censor, there will always be censorship. And so I'm very optimistic that we are now at a kind of inflection point where people realize this and switch to alternatives that do not have the possibility of censorship built in. And of course, this can also be scary. That's why we have First Amendment laws. That's why in the West we have such an emphasis on free speech in the first place, because it is dangerous. But the alternative is even worse. With free speech, you can write manifestos and all the rest of it. There's hate speech and all of it. You can incite violence. What I'm trying to say is that having not only these free speech platforms, but also underlying of it, unstoppable payments, it can feel scary to some, but that's just a very, very shallow way of thinking about this, because you need to have these things for a society to function. We need to make room for the free flow of ideas, but also for the free flow of value. Otherwise, we will never be able to figure out what's going on in this complex world. And so I am very, very hopeful that more and more people realize the importance of this and are going to make the switch to it. And I have no illusions, it's in the world of Spotify and YouTube and so on, and Twitter and Facebook, it's gonna be a long battle, and it's gonna be an uphill battle, and it's gonna take a long while for people to realize it. But I also think that time is on our side, because value for value and the idea of value for value will not go away. Bitcoin will also not go away. The Lightning Network will also not go away. And the reason why they won't go away is because all of the things I just mentioned are ideas and platforms. And they're the closest thing to immortal that we have. It's just like the Bible. It outlives empires. And everything else that I mentioned before, YouTube and Twitter and Facebook and Spotify and all the rest of it, those are companies, and they will go bankrupt. Just, I don't care how long it takes. Right. Facebook will go bankrupt. Google will go bankrupt. Everyone will go bankrupt. Just give them 1,000 years.
And I find it so interesting that, the human consciousness, the human entity collective, has this beautiful immune system whereby the more obvious the censorship gets and the more disturbing it becomes, right? Because every day that it continues and gets more obvious, more people are saying something's weird here, right? They start by saying something's weird, and maybe that's that first touch point doesn't land, and then they follow someone who's saying something that they acknowledge and have seen as being truth, and then that gets taken down, and it's like another touch point. Oh, that doesn't make sense. That's weird. And the more hardcore they go on trying to censor truth and censor people in general, the bigger the immune reaction gets to creating protocols that are uncensorable. And the whole, one of the lines that you put in your piece was, free speech platforms cannot exist. Only free speech protocols can exist. So maybe can you talk about the difference between a platform and a protocol, and why that reversion to protocols is so important for kind of the future of not only value for value, but also just like freedom of speech. Like the preservation of freedom of speech actually depends on us developing unstoppable code, which gives us protocols that cannot be censored, right? Like this whole idea of we won't censor you or we won't manipulate or sell your data really needs to become, we can't censor you and we can't even collect your data. Here's the code to prove that it's not even enabled. And I think, can you talk about platforms versus protocols and why it's so important to get back to protocols?
Yeah, exactly. And that's also why Bitcoin is so ingenious, because if you just have an assurance by some people that are running the thing, let's pick any platform, let's pick Twitter just for sake of example, and you have the assurance of Jack Dorsey, and he will tell you, he's for free speech and he will not censor people, like it's only as good as his word. That all, like, we're humans, we're fallible, and every human will be corrupted given enough time, kind of. Yep. That's why I'm also not a fan of immortality.
And to think that Jack has supreme control over a massive beast like Twitter, what Jack wants might not be what Jack can do.
So. I think that's also why he left, like he's not the CEO anymore. But because those things, that's also why Google had to remove the tagline, don't be evil, like it just grew too big and then it got evil. And it's just right. And so the difference between platforms and protocols, it's, again, I think the best way to think about the protocol is just like the English language or math or chess. Like no one is in charge, it's just, there is no company behind it. And a platform by definition has a company behind it, and also like a monetary incentive behind it, in the sense that if you don't make enough money, you die. And that's why platforms are always, they're always turning. The system is always turning on itself. It doesn't matter how good your intentions are. And that we saw, because so many people recognize the problem of people getting censored on the platform, new platforms popped up, like, I don't know, Gap and what have you. There's like 50 now of those, and they're all, we will never censor, it's free speech, and so on and so forth. But just the fact that they are companies and they need to make money and they're run by humans, it's impossible to keep this promise. And if you get big enough, there are other forces at play. Suddenly it becomes political, and suddenly you have nation states knocking on your door and forcing you, it's like, remove this person for the platform or we will kill your whole family. What are you going to do? And it's
all companies have choke points. That's the biggest
exactly.
thing. It's like, if there's a choke point, it will be found and it will be exercised by someone with more power and more guns. That's the reality.
Exactly. And that's why what you said is so important, like building open protocols where you don't, the assurances that you have, they are not political in nature. They are not just promises spoken by humans, but they are promises spoken by mathematics, for example. And you can cryptographically verify and prove that no one can, for example, with end-to-end encryption, no one can snoop on this message. No one in the middle can read what is being said. That's the idea of end-to-end encryption. And for Bitcoin, of course, like no one can mess with the hard limit of 21 million Bitcoin. That's just, you can look at everything and figure it out for yourself, and you can come to the conclusion, like all the other Bitcoiners, okay, yeah, that's set in stone. And we need those things that remove the possibility of human corruption from the system. We need things that remove those choke points, because if you can deplatform people, you will deplatform people. If you can censor, you will censor. If you can print money, you will print money. You will find a catastrophe or an emergency large enough to just go ham and print as much money as you can. It's in human nature, and it's at the time it might look like the reasonable thing to do. And so it's about using protocols and finding ways that remove the fallibility of humanity from those very important systems.
And the creation of protocols really has its own sort of natural selection, right? I love the analogy that you use with chess. I'm going to munch on that for a bit, because it's like you could create chess 2x, right? Double the board size, put all these weird things. It's like
exactly.
You can create that. You can create your own rule set. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean anyone's going to want to or is able to play with you. And so it's like, I think with protocols,
and it also sorry to jump in, but I the reason why I have this example in my mind, because I'm currently, as you mentioned, I'm writing a second book now, and I have it in there because Bitcoin is very much like a game in that sense as well, and chess is the great analogy, because also it doesn't even matter, because now currently there is an official body of chess and blah 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 that define the rules and so on. But even if they would come out and say, okay, like tomorrow we will change the rules of chess and the board size will be twice as much and so on, it doesn't matter. Like that's not why people play chess, and that's not, like it wouldn't change anything. People would just play chess the old way. That's also why like language is another great example. Just because there is someone who tries to dictate how we speak doesn't mean that people magically change their ways of speaking, and that's why Bitcoin is so hard to change. It's just like, if the official body of chess comes out and like if the chess association comes out and it's like, we're going to double the board size, it's absolutely nonsensical. That's not how the rules of chess evolve and change.
Right. And because of that, the protocols that deliver the most value and can be understood and used by the most people are the ones that fundamentally survive, right? And chess 2x is probably not going to survive if no one can play it, right? It'll be a thing in a museum. And this whole idea of creating protocols and really just allowing people to judge individually, which creates a collective judgment of which protocols deliver value, true value that resonates with people, those are the ones that survive. And then those are the ones that acquire network effects so that more people use them. And, I don't know how many platforms we're going to have to blast through so that people see, oh, this one that said they wouldn't censor now censors. I don't know how many times we're going to have to go through that iterative process before people realize, like, we need a protocol that no one controls, that we all self-select to use because of this feature set. And as soon as it gets created and as soon as it gets liftoff in terms of like enough people using it and talking about it, you essentially create an unstoppable social protocol that essentially obsoletes all the existing companies. And it's only, I think the companies they should be scared. Like, I think people are seeing firsthand the power of protocols through Bitcoin and Lightning. And, to go into the social media business is a risky business to go into in the age of protocols.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that, I mean, it's such a difficult topic, because there is also something to be said about centralization, because the hard thing about decentralized things, let's pick chess again, like the rules of chess evolved over time, and but very, very, very slowly, just like languages evolve over time, but also very slowly, because some changes make sense, and it's very similar to Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a decentralized system. It takes a very long time to get new features in and those kind of things, even if the features would be very beneficial to the whole system, and we see this with decentralized alternatives to Twitter, for example, that you just cannot keep up with a well monetized company that is centralized, because you can make decisions way, way, way faster, and you can iterate faster, and so you can develop features faster and so on. But I think, and this is a big but, I think there are like, before I went into Bitcoin, I was deep into the open source and free software philosophy, and I still am, and I'm still a huge advocate for all of this. And the reason is the same as the protocol versus platform discussion, because protocols outlive platforms, period, because platforms are companies and companies go bankrupt. Protocols are more like, the Bible. It's just information, it's there, and if it's interesting enough for most people, you can pick it up and improve it and so on. And the same is true for free and open source software versus closed source software. closed source software always goes away, because if the company goes bankrupt, it's gone. And for free and open source software, it just survives, and it can only improve. It always improves incrementally, and it's a very slow process. But I think we are currently at a point where free and open source software caught up to a lot of the commercial products, and it took a while, but there is always a point where the thing gets as good as it gets. And we see this with smartphones as well, or with laptops. Like there is a certain form factor, because it's again, it's like you have this evolutionary environment, and you will find a local maximum. Kind of all the smartphones look the same today, and so now you have even open hardware projects that can build it cheaply on open hardware and so on, more or less cheaply. And the same is true for software. What kind of features does a messenger need to have? What kind of features does a web browser need to have? What kind of features does a image viewing application need to have? And so on and so forth. And I think the same is true for the applications that we all love and use now. What is needed for a conferencing tool? What is needed for a team communication tool? What is needed for like a social media platform, or like a microblogging thingy like Twitter? These have limited feature sets, and I think we are very close to open protocols being developed that implement that. And I think if you're not careful as a company, and you don't have a moat that's very easy, if you don't have a moat that's very hard to replicate, if you don't have a niche that you occupy, and if you don't have strong network effects, you're going to lose to the world of open protocols, because an open protocol can just outlive you, because it doesn't have the same economic constraints that you have in paying employees and running a company and so on and so forth. So I think it is very, very interesting times, and we see in the Bitcoin world things being built currently that are strong contenders of truly killing off Twitter and Facebook and all the rest of it. And it's going to be very interesting in the next couple of years to see how this plays out, because also in the monetary space, the people that currently have all the money and the control and the power, they will not step aside willingly, and they also will not step aside silently. So I often said in the last couple of years that we are still living in peacetime in the Bitcoin world, and I have the feeling that peacetime might come to an end, because I think it will take maybe 1 or 2 more years, and then a lot of people are going to wake up that a battle is currently going on.
Yeah, and I don't think the wake up, there's a difference between waking up naturally and waking up because someone just prodded you with a hot iron. And I think the latter is going to be the kind of waking up that we're going to start to witness, and it's not optional. When you were talking about protocols and platforms and this whole idea that centralizing, there is value to centralization. And it kind of brought to mind this notion of platforms still existing, but platforms being a layer 2 on top of protocols, right? And this whole notion that if you create a company which has its own set of incentives, but you transparently articulate the incentives, and you skin the protocol with the best user experience while respecting the integrity of the base protocol, I think that's where you're going to see companies that can hire really good engineers because they offer a good feature set and have built a big moat, but they build on top of a platform, on top of a protocol rather, such that they can't abuse power, right? Like the protocol creates a set of constraints that are immutable, that they cannot break. They can't break those promises. And there will be many companies designing and building different social media platforms on top of protocols. And so they get selected for based on the quality of the experience, which I think is it seems like that's where we're going, right? Strike it's not a mystery that Strike builds on the Bitcoin and Lightning protocol, but their goal is to build the best user experience platform by giving people what they need and want and useful features. But they still have to abide by the rules of the protocol. Yeah. And so I think there's something, Strike can't just print more Bitcoin because their users want more Bitcoin. They can't stop you from, technically they can stop you from opening a Strike account, but the interoperability of the Bitcoin network is such that if Strike denies you an account, you're just going to go to another centralized platform that is built on top of the Bitcoin protocol. Therefore, the best survive because that's natural selection.
Yeah, and we also, I mean, we've seen this in the past, I mean, that's why the internet is so damn successful. And also email is a great example, like there's email and there's, I don't know how many different email companies, and Gmail, of course, is the largest one, I guess. I'm not even sure about that, but it probably is. And I think that's how things should be. The interesting thing will be, because with this approach, if you, again, it's like a philosophical issue. It's a philosophical point, because it's in your best interest as a company to build up a walled garden. And we see this, in all the ecosystems. Apple is the largest offender there, in my estimation. But it's really, really hard to switch away from Apple, because they make it so convenient and they build the walled garden so nicely. The exit cost from you switching from Apple to something else is really high. And what I hope, I really hope, it might be a naive thought, but I really hope that more people put kind of the right thing above their profits, and build things where the exit cost is really low, where you just can take your data and you can take your stuff and you can just use something else if it's better, And I think that's why people that have been around for a very long time, they are big fans of, like using text files and markdown files and those kind of things, and putting it on on 5 different hard disks in 5 different locations, and doing it in a very, very simple, very easy to use manner without a lot of magic, where you just can pack up your stuff and leave if your hosting provider kicks you off, or what have you. And that might be a stupid example, but I really hope that there is a future ahead of us where we the infrastructure is provided by these open protocols, and where the standards are well defined enough that you can also, just in the virtual world, pack your stuff and leave, and switch to a different system, switch to a different chat application. I mean, for example, like all these things that we're currently using, and it it's such a shame, because it used to work in a better way, like we had chat protocols that were interoperable, just like email. I don't care if you're using Gmail or ProtonMail or what have you, or Hotmail. I can send you an email and that's it. And currently, if I'm using Telegram or WhatsApp or Signal or what have you, I can't send across these apps. And that's really terrible, like it's it's like back in the AOL days, like you have one browser and you can't access half the stuff because you're not part of the open internet, and so I really hope that especially engineers that are actually building this stuff will realize that there is kind of a right way that benefits humanity, to like a right way to build things, and a wrong way that just benefits one company. And I hope that value for value has also something to say there, because it's all about building open standards, open protocols, and just being open in general, like especially with the value for value idea. Is like, okay, I cannot stop you. I know that I cannot stop you from copying this information, so I won't even try. So I'm being honest with you, and I hope that you're honest back, and you're just giving back as well. If this was valuable, just give it back. And open source software is very much like that as well. It's like, I know you can copy this app, this program, this game, what have you, and you can compile it for yourself and you can modify it and so on. But I also know that it's way better for humanity in that way. So I'm choosing an open license, and you can do with it what you want. I'm not afraid, I'm not afraid of being quote unquote stolen from. And so yeah, I think it opens up a larger question about the way to do things and intellectual property rights and all the rest of it. And I think we as humanity need to have this conversation, because I think most people can agree that currently things are broken, to put it mildly.
Yeah, and there's this notion of benevolence, right? Of trusting that people act in good faith. When you put something out there, like you said, knowing full well someone could copy it and try to sell them themselves, but putting it out there, trusting that people who get value will signal back that they got value by sending value back to you. And I think that actually aligns with, like there's always going to be bad players, but they're far fewer than I think what the perception is. Because if you go into virtual land, it looks like the world is fucking burning down every second of the day because our negativity bias indicates such that we cling on to negative things. And we already talked about, if you want to optimize time on site, just put a shitload of negativity or really triggering things. Their eyeballs will be stuck there. And so it creates this like outsized perception that the world is bad. But I don't really think that's the case. And I've seen, like, even just through our value for value streaming, they're not huge amounts, but people are sending value back based on the value they're getting by listening to the podcast. And I really think that this whole notion of really giving some power back to the creators and the uniqueness of information, which can be both a burden, it's like a double-edged sword, right? Information can be copied freely and you can't stop that, but information also exists in cyberspace indefinitely. And if you create a very good podcast, and as people come to that podcast and they listen to it, and being able to send value back for listening to that podcast becomes easier and easier. And I'd like to talk next about the mental transaction problem, because I think that's something worth unpacking. As it becomes easier and easier, and as more people find that podcast, there is no time horizon. If in 20 years that podcast still has valuable content for someone who found it and now has a Bitcoin wallet that seamlessly allows them to send value, you can get paid for a 20-year period for everyone who gets value from that podcast. And that is where this dissociation from the physical realm into the digital realm really biases creators. Like, who knows? You create one really good article and we can do value for articles, and that goes viral. Maybe you make your lifetime worth of income needed to live a simple life from one article you wrote. That is unprecedented.
Yeah. It is for regular human beings, because some people manage to do that. The guy who I don't know, wrote Happy Birthday, or I don't know, the Christmas songs.
Sure. Yeah.
Mariah Carey, managed to do that with Last Christmas alone, and she'll get with the current system that's in place,
she'll get royalties for a lifetime.
Yeah, royalties and copyright and so on, and it's also it's such an interesting thought, right? Because again, information can outlast empires. The Bible outlasted multiple empires. And so if you write something that's really good, it doesn't matter what it is, if it's an article or a book or a song or what have you, or even a movie. And if the infrastructure is still in place, and there is no reason why it shouldn't be in place if it's an open protocol, like an open protocol is, for example, TCP/IP, and the whole internet runs on it, and it's still around, and it has been around for quite a while, even though the internet is young. But I have no reason to assume that TCP/IP won't be around in like 100 years from now, 200 years from now, like those systems can. Electricity is another good example. Like electricity is the grid, so to speak, like the things that were developed in the past and are akin to open protocols. They have a way of surviving, and so like your whole, like your grandchildren could still receive streaming sets just from this conversation that we're having right now, like 30 years
your will. It's like, I'm going to will the sats to go here for this episode. Like, that's crazy.
Shout out to our grandchildren that might listen to that. There's a chance.
Yeah.
And so it's super interesting. And there's I think I even mentioned it in the piece that as you said, the limitations of meat space, they do not apply. And because if you go back to the busking analogy, you usually don't have large sums of money on you, and it's also there's a performance in time and space, and then half an hour and then it's over. And like you said, like a podcast or like an audio file can live for a very, very long time. And what's also super interesting is that there are just some people that have a lot of money, and if they are willing to give, then like that usually doesn't happen in the real world, but it might happen in cyberspace, and I've received some large value for, like way larger than I expected, value for value donations already. And it was for articles. So what you alluded to, that we can do value for value for articles already. Like every single one of my articles has a Lightning address, for example, and people send stats to that all the time, and it's kind of amazing. It's very much it's as amazing as having a value enabled podcast and seeing Satoshi's stream in every single day of the week, every like. For some people every minute of every hour, and it's really something. And also we are still, like, I want to stress that we are still at the very, very, very early beginnings of all of this. Bitcoin is still very young, even the internet is still very young, and just assuming that usage 10x's, and also assuming that we are still very early in the monetization process of Bitcoin, like the sats that you're receiving today might be substantial amounts of value in the future, and I think it can only increase from there. And yeah, it's very exciting, all of it.
I mean, what you said is like some people are donating large amounts, but at the start of this episode, it was timestamp Moscow time was 2609. So you can get 2,609 sats for $1. Like,
There you go.
let's zoom out into the future. To think that one sat could equal $1, that means that what you pay a dollar for today could be $2,609 worth of purchasing power. Now, what that gets you, I don't know in that far out, but 10 years ago or 5 years ago, someone bought Bitcoin and now they value what you wrote. And they get a shitload of value from it, and they send it to all their friends, and all their friends get value from it, and changes their family's lives. It literally saves the socioeconomic life of their mom. That might be worth $500 to that person, because now they're sitting on a huge amount of wealth, and they're looking for places to allocate it that reflect the value they get from things that people have created. And so it's hard to like create a set frame of reference because it's changing so quickly, especially in the Bitcoin world, right? It's like dog years. 1 year in meat space is like fucking 7 years, or 1 year in Bitcoin is like 7 years in meat space. And yeah, one thing I want to talk about is this whole notion that, okay, we talked about the DRM problem, digital rights management. Information wants to be free, especially good quality information. It's like trying to hold mercury. It's going to slip through. It will be copied. That's just the nature of information. The other sort of problem to solve with value for value, especially with microtransactions, is what you call in the article the MTX problem, the mental transaction problem. And this notion that every time we want to make a payment, there's also a mental cost to every transaction that we make. And that mental cost creates friction, especially when you get into infinitesimally small amounts that end up being, if you're determining whether or not to pay a fraction of a penny for something, the value that you're thinking of spending isn't even worth the mental transaction of thinking as to whether or not that's worth what you're looking to spend it on. And so, let's talk about the mental transaction problem, if you can kind of unpack that and maybe even talk about how something like value for value with podcasting 2.0 technologically helps to solve the mental transaction such that the friction of sending someone value is way lower, and which facilitates a higher likelihood of transactions happening through value for value.
It's a very interesting problem that most people are not aware of, and it's you summed it up perfectly. It's literally not worth your time thinking about if you want to pay for this or not.
Right.
So once you start thinking about it, you're already at a loss, even at minimum wage levels. Like if it's like a fraction of a cent, then it doesn't matter how little you make per hour. It's literally not worth your time to have the mental effort of thinking, do I want to make this microtransaction or not? And the one person that wrote about this most eloquently and most thoroughly is Nick Szabo, I believe. He identified this problem, as did other researchers as well, but he wrote about it in a very succinct and beautiful way. And I just tried to kind of summarize his arguments, and in a sense that's also the reason why we currently have flat rates for everything and subscription models with flat pricing. There are very few things that you pay for by the minute, like water might be an example, like the water that flows to your house, electricity as well, like you have a little gadget that measures how much you use, and at the end of the month you just pay the electricity bill, and it's linked to your usage and so on. But we usually don't, like most of the time we don't pay for things like that. Most of the time it's disconnected from the actual usage, and it is in part because of this mental transaction cost problem. And gym memberships are a great example as well, for example. Like it's way like you would not go to the gym if you would have to pay every time you enter, like it would reduce the amount you go to the gym drastically.
Or Netflix. That's another example. It's like you pay once per month, you can watch infinite videos. If you have to pay per video, you might not watch as much.
Yeah, exactly. And so for microtransactions, this problem is especially pronounced because you just don't want to be bothered in the first place. Like everyone knows this. If you want to read an article and you click on it and the paywall pops up and you just have to it doesn't matter how quote unquote frictionless they want to make it, like even if you're just not logged in, I can't be bothered logging in. It's just like I've got to click away the goddamn tab and do something else.
And there's uncertainty. Like, what if that article's shit and I paid for
yeah,
it? It's
exactly,
like, oh, now I'm screwed.
Yeah, exactly. And so Bitcoin has been around in internet years for a long time. So we just had it just became a teenager. So Bitcoin has been around for 13 years now, and we had Bitcoin enabled paywalls for a very long time. It was one of the first things that was implemented with QR codes and so on. And so you just you scan the QR code and the article just shows up. No one does that. No one does. It just doesn't work. And it is because of this mental transaction cost problem. And I think there are two interesting approaches to solve it. There are more than two, but I think one interesting one, which links into the value for value idea, is to do something like a crowd wall, where you can think of it as a paywall, but it's more like holding the content hostage. It's like, okay, I wrote an article, trust me, it's really good because I wrote good articles before. And I don't care if one person pays for it or 5,000 people pay for it. I just need like $20 and then I'm going to release it to the world, So some people are experimenting with those kind of ideas. John Carvalho is one of them, for example. He has this implemented for his podcast. I think it's called The Biz. And so it unlocks by the minute as people pay for it. And so once the whole episode is unlocked, it's free for everyone always. And so I think that's also an interesting approach. But I think truly the way to solve it is how podcasting 2.0 solves it, which is completely voluntary and completely in the value for value ethos. So you don't hold anything hostage, and you have, in a sense, like there are so many ways to do this. And I think there is now a browser extension which implements this, which is called Albi. I think it's getalbi.com, where you can install it. It's a Lightning extension where you can even connect it to your own node. So it's done in quite a nice way. And you can set an allowance for yourself for certain sites. So if you have Lightning enabled sites that support payments and the value for value idea, you can say, like Stacker News is a good example. Stacker News is basically a Hacker News clone, or you can think of it like Reddit, but for Bitcoin and Lightning stuff. And so you can set yourself an allowance, and you can say, okay, every month I'm willing to spend, I don't know, 10,000 sats on Stacker News. And so you set this allowance in the app, like in the extension, and then you can just use everything and it will split everything up automatically. Or I don't actually know how it works in detail, but I think you just, once you've spent it, it won't spend anymore. Like that's, I cool. think that's how it works. And so the way to solve the mental transaction cost problem is to abstract everything away so that the user never has to think about it. It's just like Netflix does it. It's just like the gym membership does it. You decide once. Right. That's also, you must know this from your charity work, right? Like the way to, like I think there are a lot of organizations now that really dig into this. Like, you are not always willing to give to charity. You have some days where you really want to give, and the way to capitalize on that is to set up a recurring payment where you give to charities, right? Like that's right. That's the way to do it right. Yeah, exactly. And it's just like with the gym membership. The way to force yourself to go to the gym is like, before January 1st, get a gym membership for the next year.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And so I think that's the right way to do it, also in the value for value sense. That, and podcasting 2.0 is doing it like that. Like you set how much you want to stream every minute, and you just, like, you load a certain amount of satoshis onto your Lightning wallet into your app, like every month or every week, or as soon as it's empty again, you top it up again. And I think, if my suspicions are correct, we will have both flavors of value for value in the future. And I think we will have this streaming payments idea, where you set yourself an allowance, because it can get really out of hand. Like if you sure. binge on a podcast, suddenly you're poor. Like if you discover something new and you just listen to, I don't know, 50 episodes, like that's It's not sustainable.
I mean,
But
your allowance is basically set by how many sats
yeah,
you populate your wallet with. So it's kind of
yeah,
like and I think the way that, I use a Breeze wallet when I listen to podcasts, and this whole notion that you can set your streaming rate. So it's a one-time decision that
yeah,
essentially gets put in the background so that you're not having to do these repetitive
exactly,
decision-making things. But they also give you the optionality to do a boost. Um,
exactly. Yeah,
and I think that is just brilliant, especially now. I think it's called
yeah,
Helicopter. I got that second layer on Umbral where I can actually see
yeah,
messages people are sending and the
yeah,
sats that they attach to it. And I think
yeah,
it's so brilliant because it gives you the optionality, right? It's not
yeah,
in this or that decision. It's now,
exactly.
okay, what's your baseline level of sats you
Yeah,
want to stream?
yeah,
And then you can choose how much you boost based on like how much value you're getting in real time. And that's some
yeah.
cool shit.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And it's called Helipad, by the way. And shout out to Dave
Helipad.
from
Yes.
Podcast Index for building it. And I think that's exactly the right model, and that's what I meant with. I think in the future we will see the two flavors of value for value, and it is the like always giving a little bit, which is the streaming sets part, which might have an allowance or not. Like there are multiple ways to do this, but you have to have this unlimited, uncapped way of giving back. If someone really enjoys an episode, then you boost, and maybe you boost a couple of times, or you set your boost really high. And
Right.
for articles as well. I think we will have something very soon where, I mean, someone will build it. Like I'm I'm close to being so frustrated that I'm gonna build it myself. But please, someone else do it. I have too much too much on my plate already. But I want to have something like Pocket, and in the best of all worlds, this is gonna get integrated in absolutely all the browsers, all the apps, all the services everywhere. But if you know Pocket, or like there are multiple like read it later apps, Instapaper is another one. You just you instead of like the way most people browse content online is really browsing it. You don't open one article and read it fully, and then you open the next one and read it fully. You scan through it most of the time, and if something is really interesting, then you read it fully. And so that's also how I have used the internet for the last, I don't know, like 20 years. And
Right.
and so these apps exist where you just send articles to them, and you can read them in a really nice distraction free way. And you can also switch between text and audio, so they have text to speech engines and those kind of things. And you could put value for value in there really easily, because these apps also remember where you are in your reading progress and all those kind of things. And once you like the article, or you archive it, or what have you, you simply on Lightning, you send a payment to the author, and it could all be out in the open, metadata in the article, just like we have structured data in the RSS feeds now that take care of these payment things. And you have your Lightning pub key in there, and it's going to send the key send payment and so on. And in the future, it's going to be an AMP payment. Like it's all of this is basically already solved. We just need to make the psychological switch to use these kind of things correctly. And so I think we need to, again, we need to have these two flavors where you give a little bit always, and if you really like it, just like on Medium or what have you, you just clap a couple of times, you boost a couple of times, and then you have the way to give a lot in an uncapped manner where you just can, like you can give ridiculous amounts of value back. And I think that's the future forward.
I agree. And I think this unlimited optionality with programmable money. Like I remember Adam Curry was on a podcast. This was probably like 2-3 months ago. And he was talking about this notion that, okay, well, with programmable money, we might not have this yet, but say I reach out to you and say, Gigi, you want to do a podcast? We can set it up so that maybe 40% of the sats that come in go to my wallet, 40% go to your wallet, 20% go to, whoever's helping us get the equipment in order to record these podcasts, or whatever it might be. This whole notion that there is a radical potential to facilitate honest, transparent collaboration between content creators, knowing full well that you can code where the sats go. That's some really powerful stuff. And I remember hearing Antonopoulos talk about programmable money and the fact that this opens up an entirely new dimension of options. But we can only implement the options that we can imagine. And if we're in this frame of reference of fiat, we have this artificial box created around potential things we can do with money. And until we start to sort of move beyond that and see that this new system really doesn't have any walls, and the walls are only there insofar as we create them ourselves by not allowing ourselves to create beyond the walls of the box. And this whole notion that we can now, like, you could say a percentage of every sat that gets streamed goes to whatever charity you like, so that you're,
Yeah.
like, there's unlimited optionality that I don't even think we're just starting to scratch the surface.
Yeah.
And just seeing, it's like hard to keep pace even with some of the evolution of these things, but it's very exciting. It's very exciting.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's kind of my job to try to keep pace, and I don't manage, so it's absolutely it's absolutely impossible by my estimation to keep up with all of the stuff. But exactly the thing you mentioned, it was recently implemented in Breeze by a friend of mine, and it's the episode level split. So the podcasting
Cool.
2.0 specification now has a very fine-grained way of doing splits, and you can set a certain, like, where the sets flow on a podcast level, but you can also set it for each individual episode, and the tooling is not there yet. It's still kind of hard to do. You kind of need to set it up for yourself and so on, but we will have the tooling very, very soon. And then you can, like, I don't know, if you're talking about human rights, it's like, 21% of the Satoshi stream goes to the Human Rights Foundation. And we actually, I think we were the first podcast with Closing the Loop that made use of this feature, because I helped a little bit of writing this specification and doing the first implementations and so on. But this is exactly where all this stuff is going, and you don't have to be very, like, you don't need to have a lot of imagination to see how absolutely amazing this is for so many different formats. Like for a podcast, if you play a song in the intro and the outro, like, stream the sats to the artist who wrote the song, like, a couple of percent. For if you have a sound editor, he gets, like, his piece of the cake too. And for written content, you might have someone who proofread the article, or you might have an editor, you might have someone who made graphics and so on. And there's no reason to stop at these, like, very internet native formats with podcasting and articles. You can do the same thing for ebooks. You can do the same thing for movies. You can do the same thing for just music in general. I know Adam Curry is really keen on getting the first albums released on a value for value basis. And like, the music players in the future, I truly hope that they will all have this integrated, because it is the right way to monetize information. And the Netflix of the future will have this integrated as well. And if you want to go really crazy, like in a more decentralized world, you could even have systems that work very much like 4chan, but the hosting is where content just disappears if it's not popular anymore, and where you can, let's say, for articles, or also for podcast episodes, it doesn't matter, but for articles, if it gets bumped and reshared, and if people send money to the article, it's like, half of it goes to the creator and half of it goes to the article itself, that hosts itself on something like IPFS or what have you, and pays for the hosting. And if it's not read anymore, it will just disappear, because no one will pay for the hosting anymore, and then it's gone. I mean, articles might be the wrong use case, because it's very easy to host text, it's very cheap. But for videos or what have you, you could definitely build that, and then you would have, like, a quasi autonomous organic system that sustains itself by the attention it is getting, and it's those are some interesting things that can be built.
So interesting. Like, even I had this conversation with a friend the other day, this whole notion that, okay, self-driving cars are going to seriously disrupt the way we think about transportation. And this whole notion that you could get a group of 10 people together, buy a Tesla together, program it such that every ride it gives 10% of whatever the revenue is to each person that went in to buy that Tesla's wallet. And it's a whole new realm of possibilities, which can be almost overwhelming at times, because you're like, oh my God, there's no limits to this. But at the end of the day, you can see how the human to human interaction is really going to push this forward, right? This whole notion that value for value is really a ideologically aligned way of transferring value in the world of the internet. And we kind of took this sidestep where we kind of fucked up a little bit. We went with companies. We did it the wrong way because we didn't have the technology basis at the time to be able to do it the right way. And maybe that's a good thing, right? Maybe we had to go stray off to see how truly bad we did it, to look back and say, well, at least now we have a technology that supports this. And now we know how shitty that way is. So we're not going to do it that way anymore. And so now we actually have technology, and we have more of an idea of, okay, this is a much more aligned way of humans compensating humans in a peer-to-peer way that also eliminates a lot of the problems that are unraveling civilization, like censorship, like deplatforming, like all these things that are super messed up, and we're seeing it firsthand. So, Gigi, I am extremely grateful. I'm sure everyone listening to this is very grateful for you giving us your time today, talking about this amazing article. To anyone listening, on the Bitcoin Stoa episode page for this episode, there's going to be links to, I put 3 links. I put the article that we're talking about. I also put Dear Family, Dear Friends, and Dear Bitcoiners, because I think those have been very powerful articles for me to read. Before we sign off, is there anything you want to let people know about? I'd love to hear where your new book is at, sort of where you're at with that. And maybe in future, I'd love to do another interview to hear about your writing process, because I'm always very curious as to what the process that people use when they create, how they edit, and all that kind of stuff. But for another time, let people know where they can find you, and then we'll wrap this up.
All right. Yeah, I'm there, Gigi. You can find me on Twitter. You can also find me on Nostr, if you know what it is. You can also find me on Mastodon. I am there, Gigi, everywhere. And theregigi.com is also where you can find my writing. If you want to read the article, it's theregigi.com/busking. So it should be easy to find. And also regarding the progress of my next book, it's going to be called 21 Ways, and it's going to be like a continuation of the idea of 21 lessons. But 21 lessons was like the 21 things I learned from Bitcoin. 21 Ways is like 21 different ways of how you can think of Bitcoin or how you can look at Bitcoin. And it's a couple of chapters were already released. It's at 21waysbook.com. And I think if you're interested in Bitcoin is Time was really well received, and it's the 3rd chapter of the book, so you can find it there as well. And my writing process and I'm very happy to talk about this with you in the future, but it's just like most writing processes of most writers, it's just pain, a lot of pain. It's very painful. It takes a lot of time. So yeah, I don't have any secrets.
Very cool, brother. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. For everyone listening, thanks for joining us at the Bitcoin Stoa. If you enjoyed this episode, or if you find value from the conversations that we have here, you can head to bitcoinstoa.com and send some sats to the QR code on the homepage, or you can stream sats using something like the Breeze wallet or any podcast or any wallet that has a podcast feature. So thanks for being here, everyone, and ciao for now.